The legal battle. I'm about to say by letting you know that I'm writing this on behalf of a very close cousin of mine. He is scared his ex is shadowing his internet account and fears retaliation. Now, he is a financial services guy and she is a school psychologist. Neither had a history of cheating nor having multiple open disagreements. In fact, at my BBQ parties they were always the hug types. Now they have 2 kids. She used to be an 8 and is now a 5. He's been a 6 all his life. To make a long story short, he never suspected her of cheating. Until last year. He noticed that she started mentioning this new employee, let's call him Brad, out of the blue. She used to mention Brad to him so often then by the 6th time he had to tell her to stop talking about the guy. She got upset. 2 months after that, my cousin and his wife went on vacation to the south of France and who happens to be there? Brad. My cousin is furious at this point but says nothing. One morning, my cousin's wife tells my cousin that she is going shopping and disappears. He follows her and it turns out she really just wanted to have a coffee date with Brad. My cousin goes ballistic and tries to fight the guy. He tells him to stay away from his wife. My cousin and his wife go back to the hotel room and have a full-blown fight in front of the kids. She cries and tells him that he does not trust her anymore. He feels sorry for her and drops the issue with the condition that she stop seeing Brad. She agrees. Approximately 4 months after they came back to the US, my cousin started noticing that his wife was washing her inner clothing as soon as she got in the house. He was able to see the red flag and immediately bought a detecting kit. Came back positive. He should have gone underground right there. He didn't. He confronted his wife and she went completely off-grid. My cousin planted a GPS in the car, a listening device, and a van followed her to school once. Nothing. He then started noticing that she would withdraw 80 at the end of every month, burner phone. She was using the burner phone to communicate with Brad all the time. There were 0 clues in her real phone. As far as driving was concerned, she was driving to a nearby secluded deli and dropping the car there around lunchtime. She would then go into the deli, purchase a Coke and then proceed to a nearby mall, where she was actually changing clothes and then entering Brad's car in the parking lot. My cousin got the license plates and had someone plant a tracker to the underside of the car. Let's just say that they frequented the motel a lot. Then, 4 miles away from home, she would stop at a local park and change to the clothes she had worn in the morning. My cousin's friend has a brother who is a PI. One very important point is that, once his wife went fully underground, he was unable to get a single shred of evidence from her, aside from the panty changes. In his case, what did her and was following the guy she was cheating with. She was taking every step she could to cover her tracks. She would never use the burner phone in the car, and when she had to text or call from the car using the burner phone, she would first pull over and converse. Furthermore, she was buying a prepaid phone every month, always from a different place. Had my cousin not followed her when she went shopping in France, he would have never known Brad was there. By the by, the cheating did not have an effect on their physical life. The only thing he noticed was that she was, more often than not, aroused after only 30 seconds of foreplay. These cheating spouses are getting sophisticated. Can't stress it enough. Shut up. Start listening. Shut up. Start listening. He said he was completely in the dark until he stumbled onto this site and was able to see that one. He wasn't the only one going through a cheating episode, and 2, how to proceed with life and move on from infidelity. The only thing he regrets is not having followed the shut up, ears open script. Everything else is already taken care of. His friend's brother is a PI and he got him legal advice. By the by, this has cost me many hours of my life of just sitting there listening. For hours on end. Drunk like a skunk on moonshine. From an outsider's perspective, what really hit my core was her her persistence. Saying that she wasn't cheating even though she was and knew her husband was probably monitoring her coffee, lunch dates with the guy. Makes me wonder what my wife is doing. 1. To females, their feelings are insanely real and present to them. Doesn't matter that you're a model father or husband, if she feels it, you better believe she is thinking it. Her faithfulness to the marriage is a function of her emotional circumstances, as opposed to males, which is a function of our options. Train your females to preface the real issues with I really need you to listen to me. This is entirely unrelated to the random whining I saturate your day with. 2. You will always be her option. C. She will forever feel like she can do better than you. If it happened to Brad Pitt, it can most certainly happen to you. 3. Females, always keep another guy on the side. It's usually a lesser version of you so that he does not raise any suspicions. It may even be a gay friend, and let me tell you a little secret about gay guys. Only a small minority of them are 100% gay, the rest of them will gladly sleep with your wife. 4. Females are irrationally attracted to older and richer males. The 55-year-old that was trying to get into my wife's pants, and almost succeeded had I not demanded that she stop intimating with him, looked like utter crap. But he had a $2 million mansion and was only working at a school to get health benefits. Go freaking figure. Doesn't matter if the guy looks like crap. They get into your wife's head and eventually into her pants. They sit there, listen, find a crack or a bee in the marriage armor and wait until she has a moment of weakness to then take it to a PA. Cousin provided me with an update. I'm still reeling from everything, to be honest. She was always the one I thought I'd grow old with. White picket fence, laughter filling the air as our kids chased a golden retriever around the yard. Yeah, the whole American dream thing. But reality isn't a picture-perfect postcard. It's messier, harder, and far less forgiving. After I gathered all the evidence, thanks to the pie and my own uncharacteristic sleuthing, I confronted her again. But this time, I came armed with irrefutable proof. I half expected her to deny it all once more, to put on a theater-worthy performance of the innocent victim. But she didn't. She broke down, admitted to everything. In that moment, something inside me just snapped. All the pent-up emotions I'd been holding on to, the anger, the betrayal, the humiliation, they all flooded out. It wasn't even about Brad anymore. It was about the years, the vows, the family we built together. And she had chosen to risk it all. I looked her in the eyes, and what I saw shook me to the core. This wasn't the woman I'd married. Or maybe she was, and I'd just been too blind or naive to see it. Either way, it didn't matter now. I told her that we were done. Over. That the trust was broken beyond repair. Legal proceedings were initiated soon after. My lawyer told me that the evidence I had collected would make things smoother. I remember sitting there, in a sterile office filled with the scent of fresh ink and paper and feeling completely numb. How did we end up here? How did a love story that seemed so genuine and pure turn into a legal battlefield? It was a draining process, every step of it. But eventually, the divorce was finalized. I was granted shared custody of the kids. That was the one silver lining in all this. They're too young to understand what's going on, and I intend to keep it that way as long as possible. They don't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of their mother's choices and my foolish trust. With the divorce papers signed, I moved into a new apartment. The walls were blank, the atmosphere unfamiliar. But in a strange way, it felt liberating. It's like I had been given a second chance, clean slate to start over. I don't have the full answers to why she did what she did. She offered explanations, some half-baked story about feeling trapped and needing to find herself. But I stopped caring about the whys. What mattered was what she did, what it meant for us, and what I needed to do moving forward. It's crazy to think that at one point, I was willing to ignore all the red flags, even rationalize them. I loved her that much. But love isn't blind, we make it so. I've come to accept that, painful as it is. Now, I'm rebuilding. Step by step, day by day. It's not easy, and sometimes the loneliness hits me like a ton of bricks. But then I look at my kids, their innocent faces full of wonder and love, and I'm reminded that there are still things worth living and fighting for. So here I am, starting anew, a little wiser, a lot more cautious, but hopeful. Hopeful that happiness isn't a thing of the past, but a future possibility. I guess that's all we can really ask for, right? To find some semblance of happiness amidst the chaos. And I'm willing to search for it, even if it takes a lifetime. Story 2. Reflections and thoughts about my relationship of 38 years. I like feeling appreciated much more than feeling despised. Unfortunately, I get a lot more of the latter in my relationship. If I ask for a favor, of almost any kind, it's always made out to be a big inconvenience. Even the smallest thing like printing out a page for me at work, because we no longer have that capability at home. If I get a response at all, it's usually accompanied by anger, bitterness, or dissatisfaction. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. I rarely get supported, helped, or assisted without resentment for being asked to do so being added to the equation. We are no longer romantically intimate and haven't been for years. It's in part due to my spouse's poor personal hygiene. She only showers once a week, and partly due to their alcoholism, as well as my lack of desire for her. My sense of self-worth in our marriage is completely tied to whether or not I have a steady income. My spouse has let me know that they'd be quite happy, even if I completely hated my life because of having a totally crappy job, so long as I was bringing home a steady paycheck. I'd be given zero support if I wanted to take a risk and start any new venture, business at this point. I'm only allowed to find a steady job again. I was laid off 1 month ago and my spouse is already fed up with the situation. I'm getting the silent angry treatment pretty much all the time now. I'm proud of my spouse for having 2 dry spells recently, the first one lasting a few weeks, I think. But it's obvious to me now that they'll never stop drinking and smoking. They'll just try harder to hide the drinking if I continue to get on their case about it. I'm concerned about addressing it again, as I found 5 empty paper bags in the trunk of their car last week. Are they drinking at work now? I have become numb to my spouse's negative take on everything, which I understand is a bad sign in a marriage, according to experts. I've also given up on and am becoming numb to their not eating and replacing food with alcohol every night, while I make and enjoy a healthy meal made for 2. Alcoholism has made them incredibly forgetful, and they repeat saying the same things over and over again. It can be very aggravating at times. Every time they drink, they black out mentally, and often physically as well. I regularly save having discussions about anything until they are sober because I know they won't remember a single thing that's said while they're drunk. One of my daughters has confessed she doesn't call home at night anymore for the same reason. Pretty much anything that upsets my spouse is all the justification they need to drink. Whether it be a hard day at work or something they did that upset me at home. But most of the time no reason at all is needed. They come in the door after a full day at work and throw back a few stiff ones regardless of anything else. I have often thought, oh, why bother with divorce at this point? Their drinking and smoking will kill them soon anyways and save both of us a lot of headache and heartache. But even though we don't share any quality time anymore, I still realize I'd miss not having their company. Their presence is better than being alone most of the time. Strangely, I've realized I even take comfort in just hearing a cough from the next room. There are things I'd miss about our marriage if it were to end. Having someone to worry about me when I'm late coming home, having someone to talk to, not being alone, being able to go away and do other things like camping with my kids, or spending a night with my friends elsewhere, all possible because someone is home to look after the animals. And lastly, having some assistance with paying the bills makes our current residence possible, without which we'd be forced to sell our home, eventually. I remember telling my dad that I thought I was ready to move on and didn't care what it did to our finances. With tears in his eyes, he said, "I think she really is a sweetie, you know." That really tugged at my heartstrings and made me realize that leaving a marriage affects all the family in your life. You lose the continuity that a long-term relationship provides. Over a decade ago, I was presented with the opportunity to leave when our marriage counselor said, "Are you tired of climbing Everest? Do you want to stop now?" I thought it was what I wanted at the time, but in that moment, I took one look at the forlorn look on my spouse's face and just couldn't bring myself to do it. That was the last marriage counseling meeting we had. I've been eating breakfast as I write this, and they just walked into the room. Instead of saying good morning, they said nothing, had a scowl on their face, and looked at the floor. In this moment, I felt the information they conveyed to me was, "Oh, it's you, the person who disappoints me the most in life. I have no desire to talk to you. There is nothing to look forward to in our relationship. We'll never go out again, and outside of some home maintenance, we'll never do anything together again. Everything couples might do together seems completely off the table now. No long walks or bike rides, no camping, no outings of any kind ever again. I get that we're getting older, we're 56 now, but even mom at 89 and dad at 87 still did a lot of things together. Lunches and dinners out, book clubs, meetings and get together with several different organizations, outings with friends, retreat weekends away and a trip south somewhere every winter. I think my alcoholic spouse has become completely antisocial as a result of their alcohol dependency ruling their life. As far as our marriage is concerned, I exist for one reason only, to bring home a steady paycheck, and perhaps, to a lesser degree, provide a presence in what would otherwise be quite a quiet and lonely existence, now that our kids have moved out. When I'm not working, I often feel like it'd be a great deal better if I were just dead, as then my spouse would at least have some life insurance money, and the kids might be around a bit more for a while, at least until the grieving period was over. A decade ago, I was asked by two different people on two separate occasions what I thought the purpose of life was. They both seemed shocked when I said, "Nothing, I'm just waiting to die." At the time, death seemed more desirable than living out the rest of my days in misery. Now I'm a little more on the fence about it. I gave up drinking on our honeymoon almost 34 years ago now, and I had to give up smoking a few years ago too, as I had become so unhealthy. The constant smell of cigarette smoke, and the combination of the smell of alcohol and cigarettes is especially revolting to me now. I want to distance myself as much as possible from it. I think it's also disgusting that after decades a person can still adamantly refuse to see a dentist. Teeth become stained and gross looking, and I don't understand how someone could not care in the slightest when the discoloration has become so severe, and all dental costs would be covered by their health coverage from work. I'm scared to have a normal conversation about anything when my spouse's mood is off, which is most of the time, because I fear the conversation will always go south. So why engage in the first place? We still have honesty, trust, and love, I think, but I'm convinced we'll never be a truly happy couple again. There's just too many important things missing in our marriage, and sadly, nothing to look forward to, except maybe the sweet release of death. I feel like I'm at a crossroads now. I feel I have only mediocre reasons for staying in my marriage. The pluses are: number 1, our home still provides a safe haven for our two daughters to come back to if and when they ever need to. Number 2, it's easier to do nothing than go through all the turmoil and hell associated with getting a divorce. Number 3, there's continuity with extended family when you stay with the same person. Number 4, she still shows me she cares about me every now and then. Number 5, I'm scared of going it alone. Number 6, it's easier to pay bills with two incomes. Number 7, I'd feel super guilty if I abandoned her. Some of the pitfalls of staying in this marriage are: number 1, never sleep together again. Number 2, constantly dealing with the emotional turmoil of being married to an alcoholic. Number 3, being constantly grossed out by the smell of alcohol and cigarettes. Number 4, having to look after my spouse in her time of need for the rest of our lives after the smoking causes her to have a stroke. Number 5, living with a person who is constantly negative and drains me of all my positive Kai energy. Number 6, not having a social life ever again. Number 7, always feeling like I'm not good enough, especially when I'm not working. Number 8, always grappling with staving off depressive episodes without the use of expensive pharmaceutical products or alcohol. In conclusion, from the posts I've read so far, I appear to be the exception to the rule, as I am the husband of an emotionally abusive alcoholic woman who refuses to seek help or treatment for her addiction. I have as many reasons to leave as I do to stay. I think I could be happier with someone new if I were so lucky as to find her, but the odds of that are against me at my age. I became alcoholic after we met as well, but I stopped drinking during our honeymoon. She didn't. She's been an alcoholic for the entire 38 years we've been together. I'm convinced she'll never change, ultimatum or not. One of my daughters thinks I should have left her years ago. And yes, you're right, I may not meet anyone else, but then again, I just might too. I taught Latin and ballroom dancing from 2010 to 2014, and I saw a lot of relationships come together in dance class. If I left her, I'd be out dancing every night. In fact, just the idea of doing it again excites me. Too bad there's a lockdown going on. I honestly didn't know what to expect by spilling my guts online, but I'm delighted to get any sort of feedback at this point. I think you're right, a real solution that addresses the root problems isn't likely to ever happen. But honestly, I'm not sure leaving her now makes sense. Her mother passed at 57, and she didn't smoke or drink. Her mother's siblings also passed very young, and my wife has always maintained that she too will die by age 57, which is only 1 year away now, and she seems to be doing all the right things to make this placebo a reality. I just need to hang in there 1 more year and it'll likely be all over. Praise the Lord. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. I've been living with her being this way for so long I'm kind of numb to it all. But yes, you're right, our marriage is completely devoid of happiness and I am miserable. My daughter doesn't know I've posted anything about our marriage, but she literally just told me I should have left her years ago, and she thinks it's ridiculous that every time she visits us that her parents just ignore each other as much as possible and barely say a word to one another in order to avoid conflict. She told me she hates the energy in our home and doesn't like being here and can't wait to leave. She doesn't even want to stay for Christmas and instead wants to spend it with her boyfriend's family. It really makes me sad. Now that I know our being together is keeping my daughters away, it feels like the right time to leave, more than ever now. People been telling me, leave now and try and make the most of the time you have left, is indeed helping me to become more resolute about finally making the right choice, a decision which I've been putting off for far too long. Ironically, my one daughter is just coming to terms with the fact that her fiancé is an alcoholic, and she just sent her sister a list of characteristics that children of an alcoholic parent often have. My other daughter just read me that list. What an eye-opener. 19 out 20 items on that list describe the two of them to a T. I'm now trying to convince her to leave him before the cycle repeats itself. Nobody has ever told me to focus on and put self-love and respect first before. Now that I'm really thinking about it, I realize my sense of self-worth has always come from my perception of what others think of me, and in particular what my alcoholic wife and daughters think of me, since they are the ones I am closest to and spend the most time with. The relationship I have with my wife has become so toxic it's begun to seriously affect both my mental and physical health. I've started going to the gym every day in an effort to reverse, or at least slow the progress of the physical issues like the onset of type 2 diabetes, gout, and an enlarged prostate. The bigger hurdle now is repairing my mental health. Hopefully getting back into shape will help me cope better with that as well. Of course, more is and will be needed, and to that end I've already chosen the first family group meeting I'll be attending. Today I'm also going to try and find a therapist too. My daughter is indeed at a crossroads. Although she loves her fiancé, and she's stuck by him for over 4 years, she's only recently started living with him full-time and is just becoming fully aware of his alcoholic issues. Up until now they've maintained a long-distance relationship with her stuck at home in Canada and him stuck at home in Florida due to the pandemic. She's quite invested in the relationship but is obviously now questioning her future life with an alcoholic. And yes, I think you're absolutely right. If I do nothing and stick it out with her mother, who is a raging alcoholic, as she herself put it, I'm sending her the message that it is the right thing to do, when I want nothing more than for her to call it off before she gets in any deeper. As she told her sister yesterday, every day he comes home he immediately downs 6 tall boys. My gut is telling me she'll never be able to change him. 4 years ago, he worked for and stayed with a close friend of mine who told me he was shocked at how fast he downed several tall boys, and that's coming from a guy who can be a very heavy drinker himself. The borders opened up and he came here for our Thanksgiving get-together and put back so many mixed drinks that he started acting out quite obnoxiously, and I didn't know how to deal with it. At that point, I told my daughter, "You don't want to be married to an alcoholic," but she completely dismissed my comment and said I'm not leaving him just because he had a few too many. Now she knows that a few too many is actually a daily thing with him. I'm scared now that he'll figure out. She's concerned about his drinking and what it means for their future together, but instead of doing something about it, he'll convince her to elope so she doesn't leave him. My wife did stop drinking on her own for almost a month after I told her I couldn't understand what she was saying most of the time when she was drunk because she slurred her words so much and that it was getting really old. She quit for a month after that talk. 4 days into a relapse I left her a note which simply said please stop drinking. Again, she stopped for a while, I think, either that or she just hid it really well, but she's clearly back at it again and is doing a poor job hiding it. Now she goes to her room and drinks and reads by herself. She tries to articulate her words more clearly now, while under the influence, but it's almost comical how slowly and deliberately she pronounces every word in an attempt to address my comment about not being able to understand her. It's kind of ridiculous really that she thinks it's still okay to drink so long as I can still understand what she's saying. I have to give her credit for trying to stop drinking, and for a while, succeeding at it all on her own, but she becomes so irritable and unbearable to live with in the interim that it's almost worse than when she's drinking. But I'm still quite willing to put up with it as I know how hard it must be for her. I'm surprised her stopping didn't land her in the hospital. I thought it almost certainly would. I sent her info about going to a detox center facility, which also prompted her to stop drinking briefly. So, all total my efforts over the last 6 months have resulted in her abstaining from alcohol for 1 month, followed by a couple of weeks, then a relapse, followed by another few days abstaining and then another relapse. So there does seem to be some hope, but not much. Perhaps the only thing I can do to get her to stop permanently is to tell her I'm ready and prepared to leave. I've run out of ideas. She genuinely loves her drinking, and probably more than me. I guess I'll find out. I'm totally dreading that feeling like I'm dying part you so aptly mentioned. You've obviously been through this yourself. I know how that feels as we crossed that bridge 12 years ago already. I was going to leave her because of her drinking and also because I was emotionally involved with my dance partner of 7 months, and it seemed like I had a second chance to be happy again. My parents got involved and convinced me that leaving my wife for another woman was not the right choice. It would have also resulted in a very bitter divorce. In retrospect, I think they were quite right, as I had just begun to notice a few red flags with her anyways. I'm pretty sure she was alcoholic too. My life would probably be an even bigger mess now had I followed my infatuation and hooked up with her. Divorce, I feel like this will destroy my wife and I'm going to end up totally regretting it, for quite a while, because of all the pain it will cause her. But I'm not sure how sticking with my current situation is any better either. I'm clearly an enabler if I simply continue to let things carry on as they have for so long. Both options are terrible, but at least by leaving I'm opening the door to the possibility of a happy future. When I tell her, I know she'll try and quit drinking again to keep me from leaving. Perhaps she'll even suggest marriage counseling. But in the end, I also know none of it will amount to a hill of beans, because her addiction is stronger than her willpower, and it will always win. I used to think my daughters would despise me if I gave up on her and left. But recently I've learned they're actually more on my side. One daughter is telling me I should have left long ago, and the other, the one with the alcoholic boyfriend, has suggested I seek out professional help first. The only marriage counselor we ever tried was a disaster. She sided 100% with my wife because she was making more than me at the time, and as far as she was concerned, that was the #1 issue in any marriage. My wife's alcoholism was never even discussed. I'm a bit jaded about marriage counseling now, and I feel as though I'd probably end up in the loser's corner again. I'm not sure I even want to bother going there again at this point. However, if my wife suggests it and wants to give it one last-ditch effort, I don't think I will be able to deny her that, so long as it's a different marriage counselor. My wife is extremely stubborn, and I just know she'll never join AA and do the 12-step program, even though that is precisely what she needs to do in order to avoid a similar fate to that of your late husband. I'm pretty sure she is depressed, although she's never been formally diagnosed. In her current state of mind, I'm not sure she even cares if she lives or dies. I think it's possible she may even have a death wish. I really have no desire to return to marriage counseling, and I very much appreciate your insight that it wouldn't work anyways while she's still active in her addiction. I'll use it if she suggests going to see one. Thanks also for letting me know I'm way too involved with her addiction. I have been taking a back seat and letting her drink herself into oblivion for the longest time. It wasn't until one of my daughters broke down in tears and said her mother was a raging alcoholic that I finally decided to say something to her about it. Too little too late. Her alcoholism is so entrenched now, it completely controls her. I'm a little surprised she's lived this long, as more than half the calories she consumes come from alcohol. She hasn't had a bite of food after getting home from work in ages, just alcohol. How long can the human body survive this way? Her dad was an alcoholic too, but he still ate 3 meals a day. He made it to 65. My wife doesn't have a doctor, and she hasn't gone to the hospital since 2005, and she only went then because she had developed a hernia and couldn't bear the pain anymore. You're not wrong though. The scenario you suggested is a very real possibility. Recently there have been 2 instances for which she needed medical attention. She fell out of bed last month and broke her nose, and despite my insistence on her going to the hospital, she waited a few days before going to a walk-in clinic to have it looked at, and she only went then because she was having trouble breathing. Prior to that, in September, she knocked a boiling pot of water off the stove onto herself. I wasn't around for that one. Instead of going to the hospital, she called my brother who lives nearby for help, and that was it. I guess what I'm trying to say is she's likely to wait until a health problem becomes so bad that seeking medical attention is her only option. And by then, if it's something serious like cancer, it will have progressed to such a point that there won't be any hope of saving her. My wife is a farmer's daughter. She's very tough. She could very well live a long time yet, despite the abuse she continually inflicts on her body. Her dad smoked 2 packs a day and drank, and he lived 9 years longer than my wife's current age. I'm really not waiting around or wishing for her to die. I've just not been doing anything, period. I'm only just realizing now that my inaction, my putting up with all her negativity and her alcoholism for so long, actually enables her to continue doing the very things I want to see end. If she is the only one that can help herself to stop drinking and take the appropriate action to do so out of her own volition, what else can I do? I'm damned if I do, because an alcoholic has to want to get better for themselves, and damned if I don't, because by taking a back seat and saying and doing nothing, I'm an enabler. The dominant theme in pretty much everyone's responses so far is, leave, now. Although I realize that's probably the right course of action. Sadly, the stats say most people who get divorced aren't any happier afterwards. But I guess every situation is unique and mine is just screaming for me to get out, before I really do get trapped for the rest of her or my life. When asked years afterwards, the majority of people are not any happier after divorcing. In my case, I think the guilt I'd feel by leaving and knowing what that would do to my wife and family might feel just as crushing as putting up with her day to day. We'd also have to sell our 30 acres of heaven in the country which we're both quite attached to, and we'd probably both end up living in tiny little apartments somewhere. Divorce would severely alter both our lives. It's easy to say, just leave now, what are you waiting for? When you're an outside observer, it's another thing to be in this pickle and contemplating a new and very different life apart. I don't even know how divorce works exactly. Don't you have to be separated for a year first? Update. Despite my wife's alcoholism, after 38 years, she has become very attuned to me and our daughters, and without my having directly broached the subject with her, she now realizes I am considering separation, which was clearly breaking her heart last night. I cuddled with her for the first time in ages while she cried and kept telling me how much she loved me. I was in the middle of my first ever Zoom therapy session with a social worker yesterday afternoon, when she surprised me by coming home early from work. We were discussing my marriage and our relationship issues, but by the time my wife came in the door, the conversation had become focused on me and what I needed to do in order to find joy and happiness again. I thought it was my daughter coming back, after having just left the house to give me some privacy. But 15 minutes later I heard my wife cough and I realized it was her. She never comes home early. The only thing I'm sure she overheard was the therapist telling me, happiness comes from within and I'll never find lasting joy if I depend on getting it from another person. My wife's timing coming in the door seemed almost surreal. I think divine intervention was at play. After my call ended, she asked me what was up, and I told her I was getting some help to deal with my depression issues. I then left to join my daughter at the gym. By the time I came home, my other daughter was sending me text messages saying that Mom was really upset because I wanted to separate. She was worried that Mom had read a letter I had written about our relationship, which I shared with my therapist as a kicking off point. My therapist told me she thought my letter would make things much worse and told me not to give it to my wife. I deleted it, but I didn't empty the trash bin on the computer, and she could have found it if she started snooping, which she's done in the past. That would explain everything. I understand there are established stringent ways and methods for typically dealing with an alcoholic. There are things you should and shouldn't do to aid them in their recovery. These tried and true methods cannot be ignored or dismissed, as they have been established through decades of implementation with millions of alcoholics. They work for the vast majority, and I know that. But are they effective 100% of the time with 100% of the people who have tried them? No, sometimes they don't work, either because the alcoholic is not fully committed, or perhaps it's just not the right fit for certain individuals. I hated going to help groups, but I went nonetheless, and the other group seems very similar to me. I'm going to continue with it, for now, but it's my fond hope I won't have the need to forevermore. I'm sorry, but it just doesn't feel like a great fit for me. I've put up with a great deal of difficulties in my relationship, especially over the past decade, as I've watched my wife's alcoholism get worse and worse. As has been not so subtly pointed out, despite my shortcomings and apparent gross mishandling of things, the results I've experienced thus far, especially over the past few days, have been truly magical for a change, and I really do owe the thanks to all of you. You've all helped me, in your own ways, to start a shift of the kind I've never seen before in my relationship, and that is a very good thing. If your aim was to help me get through this in a positive and constructive manner, please give yourselves a pat on the back for having succeeded in the most extraordinary way I ever could have imagined. I knew I'd get reamed out for telling you about my going ahead with conducting a bottle search today. It's clear to me that my wife has been under the mistaken impression that she can hide her drinking from me. Over the last few months, she has used both air fresheners and chewed halls to try and cover up the smell, as well as perhaps reducing her consumption somewhat, at times, so her drunkenness is a bit less obvious. However, most of the time she has completely failed in this regard. There's no question in my mind that her stashes around the house would be calling out to her and tempting her to sneak a drink. I only wanted to remove the temptation and force her to really think twice before she starts drinking again. She now has no choice but to consciously decide to continue to drink by going to the liquor store and picking up another bottle. I've found and disposed of all liquor in our home. Now that I've crossed a new bridge with her and openly talked with her about drinking and what it's doing to her, me, and our family, and also because I've let her know I am prepared to leave if she chooses not to stop drinking, I think it's possible she might not make the choice to continue drinking. I don't think she's about to make a liquor store run anytime soon. All I wanted to accomplish was a removal of the strong temptation to sneak a drink. I understand that I broke one of the cardinal rules by doing so, but I'm still glad I did it, nonetheless. She's only on day 3 of her sobriety, and I know just how fragile it is at the moment. I'm not sure what the relevance of her vocation is, but since the question has been raised a couple of times and I don't see any harm in divulging that information, I'll tell you. She's an accountant, bookkeeper, and works in a big office with just 2 other people who literally work a whole floor away from her. She could smell like a pig pen and it wouldn't bother anyone. She's quite good at her job, makes about $75,000 a year plus, gets matching retirement contribution and health benefits. She'd be just fine financially if we were to separate. And I probably would be too. However, neither of us would be able to afford to buy the other out in the event of divorce, so a change in residence would become necessary. As far as her hygiene goes, I think the smell of cigarette smoke overpowers any body odor issues. At least it's all I ever notice anyways. As far as my dad's interference in our marriage goes, he helped my older brother remain in his marriage, and things improved with their relationship once my brother quit using. Decades later, he still attends meetings regularly and has sponsored dozens of other alcoholics and addicts. My dad tried but failed to save my other brother's marriage, and now his second marriage has also just failed. As far as I'm concerned, the words my dad said that stick out the most for me are, "It's nice to have someone to grow old with." Perhaps not so much when your spouse is a raging alcoholic who is treating you with utter disdain and has been doing so for a very long period of time. But despite that, I still do have lots of positive memories, and I'm now seeing that my wife can still be civil with me if she chooses to, when she's not drinking. Like comment, I hope you get more info on the situation you're dealing with. 2 days of good behavior on her part is not time to celebrate. You seem eager to believe change is easy. In this case it's not. You do you. Let her do what she needs to do.